Good afternoon, or good morning, actually. I'm Sal Esquivel, Representative District 6, co-chair of the Veterans Committee in the House of Representatives. I would like to tell you a little bit about why we're here today. We're here to outline a little bit about our veterans and the programs that we need to bring forward in order to benefit our veterans that are not only serving in country, but also those that are no longer serving as well. My background is I was in the service from 1967 to 1970. I did a tour in Vietnam 1 year, and I was there from August of 69 to August of 70. And I am currently, I said, the co-chair of the Veterans Committee in the House. I would like to give you a little overview of the care package bills, which we call our care package bill for veterans. And with fewer than 8 weeks left in the 2011 session, the legislature work to support Oregon veterans is not even close to being finished. The House Republicans' care package for Oregon veterans identifies 8 bills or 9 bills that would help provide jobs, health care, and support services for our veterans and our service members overseas. They are the following. House Bill 2402 funds the Veterans Service Officers Certification Program. House Bill 2578 authorizes a third veterans home in Roseburg, Oregon. Senate Bill 280 provides vouchers for medical transportation for the hundreds of veterans using wheelchairs for mobility. House Bill 2404 creates tax credits for mental health professionals who provide services for veterans and is recommended by the Task Force on Women's Veterans Health Care. House Bill 3206 provides a greater incentive for medical provisions to retain TRICARE patients. House Bill 3391, and this is specifically, these next 2 bills are specifically geared toward members and their families. House Bill 3391 establishes a task force on military families to educate the public about the needs of military families and act as an advocate for them in the legislative and state government. House Bill 3248 helps defray the cost of internet services for our military service members serving overseas so that they can stay in regular contact with their families. Today, they have to pay for that themselves. We feel that is wrong. Senate Bill 278 is a little different. It directs the Department of Veteran Affairs to develop and implement a program designed to encourage women who are veterans to take advantage of health care benefits provided by the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. This war is substantially different than the war that I served in. A veteran today, or a soldier today, may go 2, 3, and 4 times, may be deployed into a combat theater. When I was in Vietnam, we only had 1 year tour of duty. That's changed substantially. And that comes to a point of our veterans from the past. How do we take care of them? I'm going to give you a statistic that's very appalling. We lost approximately 58,145 KIAs in country in Vietnam. Today, it's my understanding from Director Willis of the Department of Veteran Affairs, we've lost over 130,000 Vietnam veterans with suicide. That's more than double the KIAs in country. We still have to make that a priority. These people are starting to come out of the brush because they, 1, didn't trust their government, 2, they were a little upset with the way they were handled by the population of the United States during the Vietnam War. They weren't supported when they were in the field. Now they're starting to come out because of age and because of their health. We must meet their needs. This is new challenges for these veterans, for the newer veterans, are different than when I was in. I did have a cultural shock when I was holding an M16 and 2 days later stepping off of a sidewalk in San Diego. It was substantially different. Today, they keep going, they come home. They go back, they come home. They go back, they come home. This is not only trying to them, because every time you go into a combat theater, you come home, you're different. But it's also tough on their families, because every time that soldier comes home, things are different. it's also different on their part as well, which will be explained a little bit more detail. Having said that, that's our priorities. That's what we intend to do. We need to take care of our veterans. If we're going to start a conflict, it's up to us, and it's our responsibility to take care of those veterans as they come home. I'm going to turn this over to Katie Eyre Brewer, Representative Brewer.
Thank you, Representative Esquivel. My name is Katie Eyre Brewer, House District 29 Representative. And I want to share just a little bit as a mom's view of what's going on with our vets. My daughter is a captain in the United States Army, and I'm incredibly proud of her. She has a husband who is a civilian, and this has also altered his life by her service. Hardly any American family is exempt from being touched by the situation that we have been in as a country. My daughter was in high school when 9/11 happened. My other two children were in elementary school. This generation is a warring generation. They do not know what it is like to be alive without a war going on. And our young people that volunteer, in thousands and thousands and thousands of them, are heroes. We stand in the midst of a generation of heroes. My concern about my daughter's generation and this generation of heroes is about the opportunities for jobs and education when they come back from their service. When they return home, for many of our vets, their skills are not easily translatable to the civilian world, and they need assistance transitioning. They need help with education to sharpen up their working skills for employability. In our current environment, employability is difficult at best, and then to return back from service with all the other issues you're dealing with to look for a job, it's even increased for them, their difficulties with employment. They need greater stability upon separation. It's a priority: job transition, health care access, housing, and we need greater sensibility to the mobility of their families' needs. I have a family in my district. When the husband returned home, they found temporary housing living with one of the in-laws, only to find somewhat permanent housing a few months later in the same school district, but with a different elementary school. And those young children of that family, for their father serving and being a hero, have to change schools. And our school districts do not have the ability to be sensitive to the needs of the children. So when our vets come back, the transition issues not only affect them individually, it affects their families, and it will affect generations beyond them. As Representative Esquivel mentioned about Senate Bill 278, which is targeted at women's health care, women vets, the hearing's not likely to, this bill's not likely to get a hearing because of a fiscal impact, but the need is great for them. Women are accessing the VA health benefits at a very low rate of just 19%, yet they have high instances of mental health concerns relating to their service, relating to military sexual trauma, and are less inclined than their male counterparts to seek the services that they are deserving of. And we are simply asking for a program to create easier access for them to the services already available. Look, these vets are our children, they're our spouses, our partners, they're our siblings, and they're coming home. And each vet volunteered at great personal risk to take care of us. And it's our responsibility to honor them and to take care of them. May God bless each member of our armed services, and may God bless each veteran and their families. Thank you.
Julie Parrish. I'm a representative from House District 37, West Linn and Tualatin, and I think I've been involved in the conversation about military families and deployments longer than most people in the legislature. Two of my children have never known a time when this country has not been at war, and our military families, they just continue to serve and they're devoted, and they continue to make the sacrifice. My husband is a 22-year veteran of the Army, currently serving at full-time in the Oregon National Guard, and this year we're celebrating 15 years of marriage, and I've been following him around for about 17 years almost now. So I have been watching this up close and personal, serving families. And the deployments, like Representative Esquivel said, they're like nothing we've ever seen. We have never fought a war like this in this country. About 2% of the country is shouldering the weight of this war. It's an all-volunteer army. It's the longest period that we've ever been at war with an all-volunteer army. And so the long-term planning that the legislature is going to do is absolutely critical, because while we've seen what's happened with our World War II veterans, our Korean War veterans, our Vietnam War veterans, and we've seen, and there's kind of a pattern established of what that looks like, We have never done combat like this in this country, where families are doing multiple tour after tour after tour. So I'm worried about what 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, even 40 years down the road looks like, because we don't know what the implications of a volunteer army doing multiple tours looks like when we come out of this war, if we finish this war. Right now, although we have no assignment yet, the Oregon National Guard is actively preparing for another large-scale deployment. It'll likely be not this biennium, but the next biennium following. So we have 2 terms to get it right. We have 2 terms to get the long-term planning done. And so the thinking that we're doing now is critical for what the next big deployment looks like, although we consistently have soldiers in theater from our state. The issues facing family right now include things like access to medical health providers that accept TRICARE, which is a very low-wage, low-paying government health care insurance provider, and particularly in remote areas. The mental health access is a huge concern for me, particularly for children. My own son was seeing a provider while my husband was deployed, and it's hard to find providers who are willing to not only take the insurance, but who understand the issues as well. The tools that strengthen the family during and ahead of deployments, communication options. You heard a bill about the internet. We talked about that a little bit. Right now, soldiers pay to communicate home so that they can have private communications. We're asking that this legislature accept a bill around tax credits that would help defray the costs of communications. Looking at education access, not just for the soldier, but also for the families. We have the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is now accessible to families and their children. A lot of times spouses wind up changing jobs. We're hard to employ because we get bounced around quite a bit, or we need to take time off from our employment so that we can stay home during a deployment. So education access, not just for soldiers, but for their spouses, and opportunities for kids, things that keep folks, the children engaged. Quite frankly, we have no military base in Oregon. So when you're looking at being deployed and you live in the suburbs, how to connect kids and keep kids with other soldiers' families who are going through this experience is hugely important. I have real concerns about the bills that we're passing on the House floor right now as they reference veterans. They feel good. We're going to, urge Congress to do something. We're going to recognize a group of veterans, which are all certainly important. And, great that they send a message, but they don't do the heavy lifting piece that I feel is involved to really, truly take care of these families. So the bills that we're talking about are bills that are stuck down in Ways and Means. They're stuck down in the Tax Credits Committee, and they are heavy lifting bills. I'm also not comfortable as a soldier's wife when politicians stand up and use veterans and military families as their campaign talking points. They vote for fluffy bills, and then we don't vote for the bills that actually carry the water. It's not enough to welcome a soldier home and honor them with medals if we don't also stand up to be there to say goodbye when we bury them at rest, and take care of the families afterwards in the aftermath of deployment or the death of a soldier. So we will be making tough budget choices this session. I absolutely understand that. And we're hearing a lot right now about, cuts in human services or cuts in health care and that they're, inhumane. But honestly, for our soldiers and their family, these are vulnerable citizens as well, quite frankly. They have a higher instance of suicide than almost any other population in our country. They have high instances of divorce and financial ruin. The Afghanistan deployment where soldiers came back, the divorce rate is somewhere between 60 and 80%. That's extremely high, higher than the average divorce rate for the country. And long-term, again, the care outlook remains unseen. So right now is a critical time to be planning, and we are going to continue to champion for these bills and dig under the couch cushions and find the money for them. So thank you. I'll pass it on to Representative McLane.
Good morning. I'm Mike McLane. I represent House District 55. I'm from Powell, Butte, and I'm a member currently of the Oregon Air National Guard. I serve as the staff judge advocate at Kingsley Field. But one of my personal heroes is Abraham Lincoln, and in his second inaugural address, his ending paragraph talked about that the nation had to strive to finish the work we're in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and for his orphan. I'm reminded of those words all the time when those of us who are in support services see friends and colleagues come back from Afghanistan or Iraq, and they don't have the resources, and we as a state don't step up to care for him or her who has borne the battle, to care for their children, to care for their spouses. Some of the challenges that they face when returning from theater is reemployment challenges, not only with finding jobs, but the jobs that they have and have changed. And a lot of times the employers are trying their best to reintegrate them, but there aren't the resources not only available for the soldier or airman, but also for the employers to know what their rights and how they can abide by the law. We find that deployed families, when I say deployed families, I mean not only the deployed airman and soldier, but the families who are behind face challenges with making rent and getting their rights under the Service Member Civil Relief Act or even under the Oregon Landlord Tenant Act. There are folks all across Oregon who volunteer and try to help these families, but we need to do more. And as a state, if we're going to see our fellow citizens off to war, to deploy all over the world in the effort against terror, we need to make sure that we as legislators step up, do more than simply applaud. We need to get the resources to these families that they need. Veterans Court has been a successful program where people like Ed Caleb, the district attorney for Klamath County, has assisted in helping veterans who are cited or who get in trouble with the law because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Readjustments are getting fair justice. And that's a program that we need to make sure gets funded and expanded. But these bills are important. And I know being a member of the National Guard, but also being a son to a veteran who died in the Dalles Veterans Home. And I saw the care that he was given as a veteran in his terminal years. And I can't say enough for the folks from the Dalles Veterans Home. And one of the bills that is up is for producing a new home in Roseburg for our veterans. And this is a need that a lot of people haven't realized is here, that we have the Vietnam-era veterans heading into retirement. A lot of them have care needs. We do not have enough beds for the needs now, and we're not going to have enough beds in the future. We must get the veterans home in Roseburg, as well as cited future homes like in Klamath Falls or Bend. But in the end, we have a duty, and we have a duty that's been long held in our country's history, to care for him and her who have borne the battle, for their family, for their children. We've got work left to do. I'm privileged to serve on the Full Ways and Means Committee. I serve as co-vice chair of the subcommittee which oversees Veterans Affairs. I'm doing everything I can to make sure we find what money is available to get it to veterans to serve their families. There's more work to be done. And in the short amount of time in the legislative session that's left, we want to make sure that people understand that the tough choices that this session has been presented and that we as legislators have to make, we're going to have to value veterans more than parades. We have to deliver to them what they need so that as they recover and regroup, they can move forward and represent us in the honorable way that they want to and they need to. So thank you very much for this conference, and I will be happy to answer any of the questions that you have.
I'd like to wrap up with one particular thing we need to talk about, actually two. You can stand in this country on a corner and berate your government. A lot of countries you'll be incarcerated for doing so. You thank the soldier and the veteran for that privilege. You can be against the war, but never, ever be against the warrior. Thank you.
I have a question for Representative Parrish. You talked about being here to welcome them. It's not enough to be here to welcome them home, but also be here to bury them. You had some comments directed towards the governor over the weekend. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and your feelings as far as the governor.
Well, tomorrow there is a ceremony in the governor's office that welcomes home Korean War veterans. I'm, again, highly appreciative of that. But we also lost our first soldier under his watch, and I am highly appreciative of Governor Kulongoski. He never missed a funeral. He was at every deployment ceremony. He showed up at military balls. He understood the culture. He understood, what his presence meant to those families. And on Saturday, we buried a soldier. We also had a 3-star general in town opening up an Army Reserve Center at Clackamas Community College. And I've got concerns that the governor wasn't present. Particularly, this was the first soldier lost under his watch, and he is their commander-in-chief, and that means something to me to see the folks who lead our service show up and be there for the family. So I've got some concerns about that, and I hope, that sadly, if the next time we lose a soldier, that he's there. He served up for a 3rd term. I would appreciate, and he's not been a governor in a war situation before. It's a different kind of leadership, and so my hope is that that he'll recognize that the next time and be there. Other questions?
Question for Mr. McLane. Elon Glicklich, Klamath Herald and News. Just in this talk about veterans, do you feel that there is maybe a different set of issues facing veterans in rural communities, say northern Klamath County, who are maybe a little more reluctant to, say, tap into, government services being provided? And how do you reach out to those individuals?
Well, thanks, Elon, for the question, and it's nice to see you face to face. While there are more services that are available in the urban areas, the military itself has done a very good job, certainly in Klamath County, in the reintegration when people return from theater. And there is everything from Operation Yellow Ribbon, where we welcome people home. But when it comes to the month later, the 2 months later, the 3 months later, when somebody who has developed post-traumatic stress disorder has, in rural areas, is a disproportionate of unreporting, and the solution is being provided by, in part, those who serve with him or her through their first sergeants and company commanders. But we don't have a good solution for the veterans in rural areas because they don't have the resources that are available to them through the Veterans Affairs and the like. And that's why veterans courts in rural areas are all the more important. And Ed Caleb, as I mentioned, District Attorney in Klamath County, Dinah Vidlins in Crook County, are 2 examples because when somebody is arrested and they're suffering as a veteran, there is a way that district attorneys can catch them before they fall and harm themselves or others. That's one way that rural communities have been well served, and it's growing. And I know that Ed Caleb could certainly talk to you more about that. Thank you.
Can I add to that? I think the health care issue in the rural communities is of particular concern. We lived in Southern Oregon, and I remember having a conversation with my doctor at the time, saying that we may or may not continue to take TRICARE. My doctor at the time is a senator on the other side of the building. So, when you look at that and you go, okay, this is a concern, and understand, since we are not a base community, our soldiers are coming from all over the state. When we deploy them, they are in the furthest corners of Oregon. They're down at the coast. And so, the mental health and the provider piece, those tax credit bills are huge to get doctors and providers to, willing to take, essentially, TRICARE doesn't pay a whole lot. So when I get the payment statements from TRICARE for a service for my child, and the, billable is $160 and TRICARE is paying $60, that's a sacrifice to the provider. And, are you going to take a full paying patient, even if your heart's in the right place? I mean, they have an overhead to meet. So, understand that the healthcare issues, I think, are the biggest issues, because certainly the folks in the rural community is equally passionate about serving veterans, but the opportunities to serve are fewer and further between. So, thanks. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Appreciate
Actually,
you. Oh.
well,
All of the bills have, well, maybe not, a lot of the bills have money components to them, and one of you mentioned, I recall, that these are vulnerable citizens too. Where do these bills fit? I mean, there's a lot of demands for money here. If these bills get funded, what would you propose maybe falls down lower on the list?
Well,
So I can go.
the serving on the Ways and Means, both in the full committee and in the committee that oversees Veterans Affairs, that's Transportation and Economic Development, is the specific cuts that the co-chairs are proposing, and in the Human Services subcommittee are still at play. And there's no good solution this biennium. There is more need than money. We have a particular advocacy that doesn't diminish the needs of any other worthy constituency. But when it comes specifically to veterans, the state has put them in harm's way. They have fulfilled their obligation and have gone into theater and defended the policy of the United States in that regard. So as they come home, the cost of these bills, which isn't relatively that high, needs to gain priority. And we're here to tell you why we believe that. The specific cuts, I will refer to the subcommittee because they are working within their own budget with regards to what the co-chairs and the governor have recommended. So we're not prepared today, but I can tell you that the cost, for an example, of the initiation of the Veterans Home in Roseburg, the tax credit for families to have an internet connection so that they can see their dad, see their husband, see their wife, see their daughter, are not significant given the fact that our all funds budget is $60 billion. And the cost for stress from combat, stress from being absent from the family and in a theater like that, when it can be reduced by simple connection, literal, both emotional and internet, that's wise spending. And our advocacy is, in the end, not only out of compassion, but the fact is that money invested in veterans and their families will alleviate the costs later. And I think the human cost, as Representative Esquivel indicated, that when you don't fulfill your obligation to the soldiers and airmen in your state, our state bears a horrific cost in a generation later.
Yeah, real quick. State Representative Jim Widener, and I want to bring something personal to this. I have a son who's serving in the military right now. He's in the Air Force, and he's done 3 tours. And his last tour, he suffers from PTSD from his first tour that he's went through and got counseling for. And he's been fortunate that he's able to contact us and communicate with his mother and I via cell phone and some ways of communication like that. When he's overseas, he pays for his internet connections. He pays for his internet time to call back. This last tour, he was over in Butte, and he had to watch his child born over the internet via Skype. So that's a benefit that we have today that they didn't have during Vietnam and some of the other times, but our soldiers are paying for it out of their own pocket. While he's still there, his son gets a blood infection, and he almost loses his son before he even gets home. So these are issues that he's facing, and he is scared to death. Imagine any one of you almost losing your child, and you're in another country, and you're not there for them. You're not there with your spouse to be there for them. And those are the kind of bills that we're talking about here today. Ways of helping out our soldiers that are active, ways of helping out our veterans that have been there, our suicide rate with the Vietnam vets, being able to support them through mental health. I mean, that's one of the big things. When you go into combat theater, the stress that you're under, especially at 18 to 22 years of age, is incredible. And you can't put a price tag on it. I mean, these guys have given their all for us. We should be able to give back to them some. And with that, I'll close.
I'd like to just address the spending piece in a different way than Representative McLane. I don't sit on Ways and Means, but I do have come to this building with a checkbook mentality, and the money is there. It's a matter of what are we spending it on. And so we're not advocating that we cut human services to get this done. I'm going to be advocating, and within the next 2 weeks, my office will be putting out a document that says where I think we can probably have some moratoriums on certain kinds of spending that would allow us to look at these dollars. So an agency that spends $1.4 million on professional development for their staff, I think we can give that up for a biennium. Or when we spend $1.5 million on an advertising campaign to be advertising on primetime television, I think we can give that up. These are things that are not going to hit PERS, that are not going to hit salaries for people, that are not going to hit, the kind of the typical where do we cut budget, but just saying, you know what, let's change the way we spend, and can we give that up for 2 years? This is, the government giving up its cup of Starbucks as far as I'm concerned. Full page or half page, color ad, full color ad in the Oregonian this Sunday. I'm sure that costs quite a bit of money to have the Oregon Lottery telling us what a great job they're doing. I think we can give that up as well. So we're actually be producing a list of what those dollars look like that have no impact on the staff of the state, but just simply say it's time to give this kind of spending up for the next biennium so we can fund the things that we care about, and that'll be coming out of my office within the next 2 weeks. So thank you.
You referred to the two